The big news of the day. This is the one that I also wanted to make sure I knew what the heck was going on before taking a hard position. One thing that you know is when you are relying on the word of scoundrels, confirmed, demonstrable, definitive scoundrels, you got to approach it with a little bit more skepticism, or outright don't believe a word they have to say until they prove the words that they are saying. Whether or not this is a national security fiasco, it's at the very least embarrassing somewhat, if only because apparently rabid anti-Trump journalist somehow was added inadvertently to a Signal chat with people involved in the Trump administration. If only because of that mistake, and assuming it's a mistake and not a deliberate mistake, which I don't think it was to the extent it even happened, but I think it did happen. It's embarrassing. The story is, and I'll take it straight from the Atlantic, we won't read the whole thing, I'll just get to the crux of it. Jeffrey Goldberg, also not to be mistaken with Jeff Goldblum. You might remember him from such amazing movies as The Fly. The Fly is a classic of all time if you haven't seen it, about a man who creates a device where he can transport himself through space and time, and in flies a fly before he gets out on the other end, and it integrates the DNA, and then he slowly becomes a fly. It was a tragic movie. I forgot how actually sad and psychologically... it's a great movie. Go watch it. Jeffrey Goldberg is a rabidly anti-Trump journalist who works at the rabidly anti-Trump Atlantic, apparently, who was apparently inadvertently invited into a group chat involving the highest members of the Trump cabinet, brought in by Mike Walls, apparently, or at least his staffer. I think Trump has come out now and confirmed that it was a staffer who accidentally added JG instead of JD, is how I suspect it happened. And no one in the chat knew, or maybe they did, and this is all one big long play, deliberate mistake, calculated sacrifice of a bishop for position. We'll see. I don't think so. He was in on this thread for a long time, listening to members of the Trump administration have what I think are totally normal discussions about policy. The Trump administration accidentally texted me its war plans. You know what's acutely missing from this entire frickin' article? The war plans. Just a minor little detail. It's missing. We're going to get to it, but it's not there. What is there is... there was discussion as to whether or not, unless you think discussion is war plans. U.S. national security leaders included me in a group chat about upcoming military strikes in Yemen. I didn't think it could be real. Then the bombs started falling. The world found out shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern, March 15, that the United States was bombing Houthi targets across Yemen. I, however, knew 2 hours before the first bombs exploded that the attack might be coming. He knew before the first bomb started, 2 hours before, that they might be coming. You know who else knew that they might be coming? The entire freaking world, given Trump's posture on the Houthis, much to the dismay of many of the people who don't want to see Trump lure America back into a foreign conflict. I knew 2 hours before that they might be coming. The reason I knew this is that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, had texted me the war plan at 11:44 a.m. What's the war plan? You will not get an answer to that question as you read through this article. The plan included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing. This was going to require some explaining. Okay. Oh, I'm certainly not doing that, young. Story technically begins after the Hamas invasion, 2023. Okay. Trump administration promised a tough response to the Houthi attacks, which we know about because he promised a tough response to it. Therefore, we all knew something might be coming. This is where Pete Hegseth and I come in. Tuesday, March 11, I receive a connection request on Signal from a user identified as Michael Walls. Signal's an open source, yada, yada, yada. We know what it is. I assumed that the Michael Walls in question was President Donald Trump's national security advisor. I did not assume, however, that the request was from the actual Michael Walls. I have met him in the past, and though I didn't find it particularly strange that he might be reaching out to me, I did think it somewhat unusual given the Trump administration's contentious relationship with journalists and Trump's periodic fixation on me specifically. It immediately crossed my mind someone could be masquerading as well. Okay, fine. Accepted the connection, hoping that this was the actual national security advisor and that he wanted to chat about Ukraine or Iran or some other important matter. 2 days later, 4/28, I received a notice that I was to be included in a Signal chat group. It was called Houthi PC Small Group. I imagine the PC is private chat, but I don't know, and we didn't get much more information from the hearings that occurred today, which we'll get to at the end of this. A message to the group from Michael Walls read as follows. Team, establishing a principals group for coordination on Houthis, particularly for over the next 72 hours. My deputy, Alex Wong, is pulling together a Tiger team at deputy's agency chief of staff level, following up from the meeting in the sit room this morning, yada, yada, yada. The message continued, please provide the best staff POC, point of command, from your team, point of communication, I don't know, for us to communicate with over the next couple of days, over the weekend. Thanks. The principals committee generally refers to, okay, fine. 1 minute later, a person identified as Mar, which they presume means Marco Antonio Rubio, wrote, Mike Needham for state, apparently designating the current whatever. Okay, then J.D. Vance wrote Andy Baker for VP. 1 minute later, TG, presumably Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence, or someone masquerading as her, wrote Joe Kent for DNI. 9 minutes later, Scott. So they all check in. You get everybody saying, yep, we're here and we're talking. The principals had apparently assembled. In all, 18 individuals were listed as staff for this group, including various National Security Council officials. Steve Witkoff, president of Trump's Middle East and Ukraine negotiator, Susie Wiles, etc., etc. SM, which I took to mean Stephen Miller. I appeared on my own screen only as JG. That was the end of the Thursday text chain. Okay. After receiving the Walls text related to the Houthi PC small group, I consulted a number of colleagues. We discussed the possibility. He goes through it. This might be a double super fakey. They might be trying to use me to spread disinformation or, I don't know, divulge that what's going on to the world for whatever the reason. We don't know that that's not the case yet, but I doubt it is. Next day, things got even stranger. Walls texted the group team. Team, you should have a statement of conclusions with taskings per the president's guidance this morning in your high side inboxes. High side in government parlance refers to classified computer and communication systems. So it sounds like they're using this as a Slack. I've never used Slack, so I probably shouldn't use that analogy because I don't know what Slack is. I want to have nothing to do with Slack. But from what I understand, Slack is, it's like communications, and they're saying, okay, keep the classified stuff classified, and let's just have discussion here in a signal chat, which is encrypted end to end, to the extent you don't invite inadvertently an Atlantic propagandist journalist. State and DOD, we developed suggested notifications lists for regional allies, yada, yada. Okay, fine. At this point, a fascinating policy discussion commenced. Ooh, do you notice persuasion, by the way? These are people texting back and forth. Whether or not they're on their work devices could be an issue if it wasn't, in terms of hackability, for the same reason that, other people using personal devices and then smashing them with hammers might have been a concern, especially these smashing them with hammers because it implies culpability. We know what they said in these signal exchanges, and it was basically people talking. But he qualifies it. He persuades you to think it's a policy discussion that they're listening to and that it's somehow therefore classified. We'll see. The account labeled JD Vance responded 8:16. Team, I found out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we are making a mistake. Vance was indeed in Michigan that day. The Vance account goes to state. 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez. 40% of European trade does. There is a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this is, as POTUS said, to send a message. If one were to think that this is deliberate, this is the type of stuff you'd want a journalist to leak, thinking they had a big break. The Vance account then goes on to make a noteworthy statement, considering that the vice president has not deviated publicly from Trump's position on virtually any issue. Oh, you mean it's like they have actual meaningful discussions of policy among themselves where there's actual legitimate disagreement? I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I'm willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself, but there is a strong argument for delaying this a month, doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is, etc. Geez, I'm talking myself into the conspiracy that this was done deliberately because it makes it look like they actually have a team with diverging ideas, reasonable people who can express themselves internally, respectfully, without stabbing each other in the back publicly. A person identified as Joe Kent, Trump's nominee to run the National Counterterrorism Center, wrote, "There is nothing time-sensitive driving the timeline. We'll have the exact same options in a month." Then you got Ratcliffe. The message contained information that might be interpreted as related to actual and current intelligence operations. This is where you're not getting that war plan that I said that this includes. 827, Pete Hegseth says, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS. Important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out: economy, Ukraine, peace, Gaza, etc. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Interesting counterpoint. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to stay focused on Biden failed, Iran funded. Waiting a few weeks or a month does not fundamentally change calculus. 2 immediate risks on waiting. This leaks and we look indecisive. Dude, I'm talking myself into this being deliberate. It's not. But my goodness, this is how you'd write it if it were. This leaks. Hey, and we got a Atlantic journalist out there, and we look indecisive. 2, Israel takes an action first, or Gaza ceasefire falls apart, and we don't get this started in our own terms. We can manage both. We are prepared to execute, and if I had final go or no-go vote, I believe we should. This is not about the Houthis. I see it as 2 things: restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest, and reestablish deterrence, which Biden cratered. But we can easily pause it if we do. I will do all we can to enforce 100 operational security. I welcome other thoughts. Wow, it's almost like there's 2 decent options, and they want to show that the Trump administration is considering its options and highlighting Biden's failures. A few minutes later, Mike Wall says, okay, fine. JD Vance addresses the message. If you think we should do it, let's do it. I just hate bailing Europe out again. Almost a common theme that they're trying to convey to the world. User identified as Hegseth. 3 minutes later says, VP, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. But Mike is correct. We are the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else even close. Question. Man, I tell you, I feel like they wanted this to get out, but what's his face didn't take the bait for leaking it. Now he's just not, he's portraying this as a classified nonsense. We'll see what this guy thinks is classified that he couldn't disclose in this article. All right, then it went, okay, and then you have all the evidence right here. After the reading of the change, I recognized that this conversation possessed a high degree of verisimilitude. The texts in their word choice and argument sounded as if they were written by the people who purportedly sent them, or by particularly adept AI generator. I was still concerned that this could be disinformation operation, whatever. I remained mystified that no one in the group seemed to have noticed my presence. Or did they? But if it was a hoax, the quality and mimicry and the level of foreign policy insight were impressive. Okay. We're going to skip the rest. I mean, it goes on. That's the bulk of it. And the main thing to appreciate is how little classified information is actually divulged. And it almost seems like the journalist is dangling the prospect of classified info without divulging whether or not it was. But according to the congressional hearings, which I listened to as we drove back, and you want to know what a kid sounds like when they don't want to listen to boring congressional hearings. Apparently kids don't find this interesting. Who the heck knew? Listen to this, one of the highlights from the committee hearing that we heard this today, if you listen to it.
Director Radcliffe, there's been indication that the CIA has warned recently retired personnel about the vulnerabilities of Signal and other encrypted messaging applications. If that's the case, why were you discussing these issues on Signal?
Senator, Signal use, as I've said repeatedly, is permissible for work purposes. I've never said that end-to-end encryption apps like Signal are a substitute for classified systems. And I was not discussing classified information in this setting.
But as you've indicated previously, perhaps the Secretary of Defense was discussing classified information, and only he can be held accountable in terms of whether it was classified or declassified at the point when he spoke. Is that accurate?
Well, I didn't say it that way. I said the Secretary of Defense is the original classification authority, and my understanding is that his comments are that any information that he shared was not classified.
But you have no way to verify that.
I don't.
Now, it's obviously, if you want to be critical and operate on the same stringent level of analysis you would if they were political adversaries, you say, of course he's going to say it wasn't classified what he shared, because his ass might be in the clinker if he did share classified information via that that Signal chat. But you know what is glaringly absent from that is anything that could be remotely considered classified. What you're having is a discussion among colleagues as to when to potentially do what everyone knew was going to be done. I mean, the world knew. Some people on the right were a little bit irritated with Trump's position vis-a-vis Houthis and vis-a-vis Iran. They don't want to see another war. A broad discussion, yes. If the guy was in there by accident, he should not have been included. Acutely missing from any of that was anything classified from the congressional hearings today. Yes, they might be trying to cover their butts if there was, in fact, classified information that was shared on that compromised Signal group chat. But thus far, there is none, even from that journalist. And do you think they wouldn't disclose it now after the fact? I mean, it's like, what's amazing is New York Times published basically criminally gotten information about Trump's taxes. Oddly enough, none of them got arrested or investigated like James O'Keefe. This guy finds himself on what he considers himself to be a classified group chat discussing military intelligence, doesn't disclose it, doesn't get arrested or investigated for it. It's almost like there's two standards of justice, and one team plays by generally accepted rules, and the other is a criminal organization that literally will plant the evidence and then arrest you for having it. That's the Ashley Biden diary and James O'Keefe. Thus far, there's nothing classified that's been disclosed. There's nothing that's been confirmed as being classified. Even by the thread itself, it does confirm that the classified info stays where it's supposed to be, and they're using Signal for encrypted end-to-end discussion about their feelings on a course of action. Now, the question is this. And I looked over in our vivabarneslaw.locals.com community to see. Trump came out and confirmed, if you believe it, and it's very tough to know what to believe, it's very tough to know what's true, that it was a staffer for Mike Walls who added JG by accident. Let me just make sure. Stands by Walls, says he's learned a lesson. Trump says that even though the journalist from The Atlantic was inadvertently added to a private chat about military plans, his presence had, quote, no impact, end quote, on military strikes in Yemen. When asked what he was told about how Goldberg came to be added to the Signal chat, Trump said it was one of Michael's people on the phone. A staffer had his number on there. I would be looking at the staffer. It's not because it's a staffer of Mike Walls that we don't think it's a deep state stooge trying to sabotage the Trump administration. Could be. Could just be one of those freaking embarrassing mistakes that is without consequence, and that is not the scandal that the left is trying to make it out to be. And by the way, notice that the scandal in all of this is what Goldberg is not telling you, not what he is telling you. Because what he told you is nothing more than an internal discussion where classified information, even in that discussion, is kept in classified silos. What is controversial, what is scandalous is what they're purporting exists, but they haven't disclosed yet. But I would be looking at that staffer in terms of whether or not it was indeed a bona fide accident or whether or not that is a compromised staffer trying to take down the Trump administration. What does the chat think? That's what I'm looking at here. On our vivabarneslaw.locals.com, it says, the asshole wishes it was classified. That is from Canuck. Canuck says, I think it was an inside job. Who loaded the phones? That, if you believe Trump, it was a staffer who had access and inadvertently added. It definitely was not a leak, says Shailena. And Cousin Bruce says, Viva, don't overlook the possibility that it was a deliberate leak. One faction within the Trump admin looking to hurt another faction. That is very interesting. This is where I say our vivabarneslaw.locals.com community is so far above average. That was from Cousin Bruce. You disagree with friends privately, and people who I consider to be my friends know that if someone does something that I think is, objectionable, I'll reach out privately before, if at all, going publicly, especially when there's no reason other than, creating drama for clicks. But that's how you do disagreement when it's sincere and among people who are working together. I don't think it makes anybody look bad except for the staffer idiot who added Jeffrey Goldberg to the discussion. So that's it. That's the scandal. You understand it now? I was not clear on the details yesterday. I said, I'm not going to trust anything these scumbags say. Oh, you want me to trust the article? Last night someone says, the White House confirmed it was true. It's like, well, what's the it and where's that from? Oh, it's from the article? The article from Goldberg confirms that the White House confirmed it was all true. Sorry. Oh, wait. All right. The White House confirms the Signal chat was legit. Okay. Makes me like JD Vance more. Makes me like Pete Hegseth more. In fact, it makes me like everyone on that chat more.